our third speaker, or actually today it's our next two speakers, are Yeun Hiroi and Danielle Zoppo, who are both from the Kinesiology department. They're undergraduate students, and their faculty mentor is Richard von Emmerich. I understand that one of the students will be presenting the talk, but one or potentially both will be answering questions. So.
Can you hear me okay?
Great.
Great.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Yeun Hiroi and I'm here with Danielle Zoppo. Today we'll be presenting on investigating differences in spatial and temporal gait parameters between multiple sclerosis subtypes. So what is multiple sclerosis? It's a demyelinating disease of the central nervous system where autoreactive immune cells attack the myelin sheath of the neuron, and this progresses to neuronal degeneration. And there are different subtypes of MS, and they're characterized by the progression of the disease. So relapsing remitting MS is characterized by relapses, which are periods of exacerbation and remission of symptoms. Secondary progressive starts out just like relapsing remitting, but we see a transition into a progressive increase in disability. And primary progressive MS, we see that from the onset, there is a progressive increase in disability with no periods of remission. Our purpose was to examine whether there are differences in gait parameters between the MS subtypes. And this is significant because it will help us understand the underlying mechanisms, improve rehab programs, and diagnose MS with greater efficiency. This is essential because we want to stabilize patients at a lower level of disability to reduce their economic burden and increase their quality of life. In our study, we had healthy controls, we had relapsing remitting MS and progressive MS, and they performed the 25-foot walk test at a brisk pace while wearing inertial sensors. These sensors measured stride length, stance, foot clearance, and gait speed. And all of these variables are associated to postural control and fall risk in the literature. Here are our results. If I could direct your attention to the box plots. On the x-axis, we have healthy controls, relapsing remitting, and progressive MS. On the y-axis, we have our gait parameters. And these brackets with the 3 stars indicate a significant difference in means. So in our results, we found that stride length, gait speed, and stance showed significant differences between healthy controls and MS. However, we did not find significant differences between the MS subtypes themselves. We used SPSS to run the ANOVA and post-hoc t-tests, and we excluded participants who used walking aids. In conclusion, we found that there are very clear differences in gait parameters between healthy controls and people with MS. However, this gait analysis may not be the best measure to differentiate between MS subtypes. So for the future, we'd like to examine the differences in these gait parameters between MS subtypes in participants using walking aids and see if we find any differences. And here is our list of acknowledgements, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Great. We already have a question from the dean. Are there differences by sex?
So we controlled for the sex based on, so the relapsing remitting group had a higher ratio of female to male. Based on the nature of the disease, the females are more commonly have relapsing remitting MS, and primary progressive MS is more common in males.
We have several questions. From Laura Vandenberg. Were the relapsing remitting patients studied during the relapse period?
So they could have been in either of the stages. The greater was they were able to walk for the time 25-foot walk test. So whether or not they were in a state of exacerbation or remission, they were able to complete the test.
From John Serrard, are there other gait parameters that you could look at?
Yeah, there are a lot of other gait parameters that we could have looked at. Other ones could have been double support time, stride length, or just symmetry versus asymmetry.
Do you have plans to try looking at these other parameters? Is that a future research direction, or?
Yes, we do. We plan on looking at the different variables to see if we can find significant differences between the subtypes with those.
Okay. Hakeem Siddiqui asked, what variables were controlled for other than sex?
We also controlled for age. So that as well, the relapsing remitting group had a younger age than the primary group. And this is also due to the nature of the disease. More often, the primary progressive group has a higher age because they have likely had the disease for a longer amount of time.
Okay. Great presentation. From a questioner that I fear I will not do well with your name. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation. Oladel Oluwayos. It's a statistical question. Please, what sample size per group was used and was the data normally distributed? The sample size per group, and then was the data normally distributed?
I keep trying to unmute myself. So we had 24 healthy controls, 16 people in the relapsing remitting group, and 17 people with primary progressive MS.
Great. I had one quick question I wanted to get in. You were asked a moment ago about the, for the relapsing remitting, were you measuring it during the relapsing and remitting? I guess I have a similar, kind of a related question is, did you somehow get similar severity, or seems like there could be big differences in terms of the severity of the MS, and how did you actually do your subject selection in that regard?
So yeah, there was a bit of similarity between the two subgroups. So we didn't use walking aids in this study. So both participants were, or excuse me, both groups were able to complete the walking test without walking aids. And that represents maybe a lower level of disability on the scale. So the groups are very similar in their ability to complete the task. And that's why the variables were very similar between the two groups.
Okay. And one more question in terms of, did you account for height in your analysis under the assumption that that might influence stride length?
So yeah, I'm actually not sure if we accounted for height, but the stride length we did based on comparing it to the healthy control group.
Okay, great. Let me just quickly scroll and make sure there's not a raised hand that I'm missing. It's not that easy to scroll through 120 people. All right, I think we've covered all the questions. You did a great job. It was very interesting. Thank you.
All right.